A driverless car to take you anywhere you want to go.
It's just kind of surreal.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
See no driver in there.
But on the streets of San Francisco, it is very real and a very viral reality. Some companies will drive, others will stall. How did we get here? Where will the autonomous vehicle industry go? We found out as we explore a driverless tomorrow. On the road to a success story, San Francisco, a city of spectacular beauty. But in 2023, it wasn't just the views that wowed tourists. It was also this.
2023 is a year where self-driving cars went from a theoretical thing to a practical thing.
Autonomous cars seem to be everywhere.
I'll hop in right now. Where am I going?
The consumer just goes on their phone, boop, summons the robotaxi, and takes you from A to B.
Robots moving along city streets with no one behind the steering wheel.
We're definitely seeing robotaxis emerge as a potential competitor to public transit.
Navigating hills, congested roads, pedestrians, cyclists. Other cities had driverless cars mapping and testing on their streets. But San Francisco had two companies about to take the next big step.
Wow.
Transporting passengers
I can't wait for this to come to Vancouver.
and charging them fares.
Hello!
San Francisco has a reputation and culture for doing things first, and then San Francisco tends to export it to the world. It is happening now with robotaxis.
Okay, here we go.
I first rode a Waymo driverless car on the eve of the robotaxi era, just as the California Public Utilities Commission was getting ready to let both Cruise and Waymo deploy their driverless car services with almost no restrictions. Up until then, Waymo was only allowed to charge for rides when there was a safety driver behind the wheel, ready to take control of the steering wheel. Okay. Few people were allowed to even get in a Waymo driverless car at the time, but we were given a special access code to try it out.
Ooh, I like it.
I wanted to go 2.5 miles to pick up my son at the Randall Museum. The car drove like there was a human behind the wheel. It navigated traffic. Really an amazing experience to think the car was driving itself. The steering wheel turning on its own. The turn lights blinking to notify other drivers. I was comfortable in the back seat. But then, the first hiccup.
Okay, I think we're stopped. Oh my God. Yes, okay. All right, right now there's a green light and nothing is happening. We are stuck. And not only that, we're not even on the left-hand side properly. Uh-oh. Okay, it says our team is working to get you moving. Uh-oh. It was green light, it didn't know what to do. So how can I rely on a car to make the right decisions when it can't read a simple green light? Now we're going. Here we go.
The trip continued. More impressive driving, down narrow roads, streets that make some humans nervous to navigate. This driverless car moved along easily until... Oh, this is weird. This is not where we're going.
For your safety, the doors will remain locked when we arrive.
So I guess it's a little confused because this is not where the Randall Museum is. So I don't know what to do at the moment. Had there been a driver right here, I would have said, hey, this is the wrong location, and I would give him the instructors, except that there's instructions, there's nobody here right now. Now I'm gonna have to call support and see what I could do because I'm completely at a loss right now.
That trip left me wanting to know more about how these cars operate. What went wrong? Woo. After insisting on an interview, we were finally able to visit the people behind Waymo a few months later.
I'm excited. Oh my God!
Hey, welcome.
Chris Ludwig is the product management director for Waymo's robotaxi service. We met him at one of Waymo's electric vehicle charging lots.
This is our depot, and so this is where our cars come home to roost at night. This is where they get cleaned, charged, maintained, all the activities that are necessary for basically them to go out back into the world, going picking people up who hail it from their app, takes them wherever they need to go, then they'll find somewhere to park or pick up the next passenger. So this is the car. This is our Gen 5 platform.
Chris then showed us the science that gets the Waymo car from point A to point B without a human driver, including all those spinning parts.
One of the main things people notice about our cars when they see it, of course, the big thing on top, and then a couple of the spinning things around the edges. And these are our LiDARs, these are lasers, and these are one of the car's primary sensors for how it sees. So these can tell you exactly where objects, people, vehicles are in space. This one up high, this is designed to see all of the main things around the car, and it can see quite far. These ones up close help you see things just around the edges of the vehicle, make sure you're aware of your direct surroundings. So camera and radar, and you can see that the placement of this is very important. Close to the nose of the vehicle, this radar and this camera actually lets you kind of see around corners. This is very important to the safety of the system because it actually has fantastic perception, 360 degrees, very far distance in all directions.
And that's important because it doesn't want to miss a single
Yeah.
thing that could be in the way, right?
What you need to do is first know where you are, next know what's around you, third predict what's about to happen next, and fourth plan your own next move. Those steps really depend on understanding what's around you in a lot of detail, and we detect that many times per second, and that's how the car knows exactly what's going around it, and that's why it's so safe. One other sensor that's very important, we have multi-directional microphones so that we can actually listen for sirens and actually detect what direction they're coming from. Just like a human driver, if it's rainy, you turn on your windshield wiper, we have the ability to spray a little bit of water up onto the dome, and then the wiper will come up and it will actually clean it. And that's how we can ensure that there's good visibility in any weather condition.
Chris and I decided to keep talking,
Yeah, here we are. You can see your initials LM at the top.
but this time riding inside a Waymo vehicle.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, let's give it a whirl. Where are we going today, Chris?
Heading to Dolo Park.
Dolores
Please make
Park.
sure your seatbelt
Yes.
is fastened.
A 15-minute trip, nearly 3 miles of city streets.
I remember my first ride. We had some issues.
You were trying to get to a destination that previously had been blocked by a downed tree. One car of ours had found that and communicated it to the others that this path wasn't accessible anymore. That's cars helping other cars know the best routes to take, areas to avoid.
By the time we went, the tree was gone.
Yeah, the tree was gone at that point. After you reported that to us, we were able to then clear that out, and then cars could route back there.
I have to say I'm a recovering naysayer
Okay. Yeah.
because I do enjoy this ride.
First time people are in this, they're watching the front seat closely, kind of white-knuckled, hands on the door, ready for anything, and then after a few minutes it kind of becomes like a normal ride in any other car. Over time, we do want to grow and expand, but it's really important to us to do that responsibly. Don't go too fast, because we know that this is a novel technology and it raises lots of questions, and we want to make sure we have time to learn, adapt, improve before we keep going on the path of scale.
Before we go too far down the road of Waymo and the secrets of how they get these cars to drive themselves, let's first go in reverse to how Waymo came to be.
This industry really took off in the mid-2000s with DARPA, and it was out of those contests that most of the programs that exist today were born, most notably the Google Self-Driving Car project.
The command from the tower is to move. Ladies and gentlemen, sandstorm.
So let's go back to 2004 to something called the DARPA Grand Challenge,
autonomous vehicle traversing the desert.
DARPA is the research arm of the Department of Defense. It focuses on high-risk, high-reward research. It's why we have GPS, drones, personal computers, and the internet. DARPA has been funding autonomous driving research since the mid-1960s. But development was slow. So in 2004, DARPA looked beyond its contractors.
DARPA conceived this idea that they would not back the research, but merely offer a cash prize for a race requiring autonomous, fast driving.
DARPA offered a $1 million cash prize to the winner of a race across the Mojave Desert. The only requirement, it had to be a self-driving vehicle.
This was come one, come all, very little restrictions or constraints on how you'd go after it, and they provided rules of the road.
And we're 30 seconds from history.
The race attracted engineers, researchers, and college kids from across the nation.
And off we go with Terramax, ladies and gentlemen.
Out of 15 vehicle entries, none made it across the finish line. The one that went the farthest was Sandstorm, a converted Humvee. It was created by a team from Carnegie Mellon University, led by Chris Urmson. Urmson would later lead Google's self-driving car project.
We're going to drive a Humvee across the desert? That's amazing. I'd been working on a robot that moved at basically the speed a person walks with a walker.
Another competitor was Anthony Lewandowski. He later also ended up at Google.
So there's this video of you on the ground with a laptop and programming it. It looked fun.
Sure, it was a lot of fun. It was a stressful time, right? So you had, something like 18 months to go from idea to race.
And off we go.
Lewandowski's Ghost Rider motorcycle fell at the start line.
What did you get from DARPA that helps the technology that you know today?
Everybody was doing random things in labs and schools and hobbyists, and this brought everybody onto the same sole focus of go from A to B. And there you had to solve the problem, but also invent, all the technology around it. So you were really stripping out all of the things that weren't necessary and really focused on, I need to go forward and make this happen.
Excitement grew. In 2005, 43 teams competed. The Carnegie Mellon University, led by Red Whitaker, was poised to win.
All that was working so perfectly. Late in the race, the engine started to falter.
The car's engine stalled. The self-driving part of the vehicle was working fine.
That meant that Stanford went past us and came in ahead.
The person leading the Stanford racing team and their vehicle, Stanley, was Sebastian Thrun.
It was certainly eye-opening to me and all of us that within a year we were able to build this technology. Prior to this, there were about 20 years of research that led to cars that could drive maybe 1 mile. And now the cars had to drive without a person inside, without us anywhere near, 440 miles. And when I saw that happening, I realized it's like the birth moment of the self-driving car. This is the moment that's going to define the field for the eternal future.
Thrun, Lewandowski, and Urmson. They all met at the DARPA challenges.
Now look at the speed here. This is the first traffic circle, and I'm impressed with how fast that Odin's going.
Somebody who didn't compete but was there watching was Larry Page. Page was already a tech rock star.
And there goes Junior. They've got Volkswagen technicians, also from Google, Intel. I mean, these guys were swarming all over this vehicle.
Larry Page came with this guy with sunglasses and a baseball hat.
Page and Sergey Brin founded Google 7 years earlier. As he watched the race, Page was already thinking of making Google much more than a search engine.
Larry is very technical. He really wanted to understand what type of innovations we brought to bear. He cared about the machine learning work we were doing at the time. But he also was very visionary. He also said, look, this is a technology that can really change the world.
Here's Junior making his way.
All right, top, we've got a Velodyne rotating LiDAR scanner, 360.
After DARPA, Thrun and Lewandowski teamed up to develop ViewTool. a Stanford University project to map streets using cameras mounted on vehicles.
We had cameras on our cars that would record the data. So then we realized, wow, the data itself is amazing. If you could just build a robotic car that could record the world and show every street corner to everybody in the world.
Google then hired them to develop Street View and Google Maps.
And I don't think the world was ready for self-driving cars, but we could take a part of the work we've done, image processing, image stitching, building maps, and bring it to the world.
Self-driving cars got put on the back burner until Lewandowski got a call from a TV producer in 2008 asking about the self-driving motorcycle he had built.
This TV producer called me and was like, hey, can you take the motorcycle out of Smithsonian? We want to do a TV show about delivering a pizza.
Google was not interested in the challenge, so Lewandowski did it on his own time.
The motorcycle is not the right way to deliver a pizza in San Francisco as well, so we did something totally new.
Lewandowski created the Prebot in less than 4 weeks.
Oh my God.
It was a Toyota Prius outfitted with a spinning LiDAR laser unit.
So we built a drive-by-wire system, we built a navigation system, we built a mapping system.
The historic trip was featured on the TV show Prototype This. It was the first autonomous vehicle to drive on a public road.
Overall, it was pretty revolutionary for 2008 to have a Prius drive through San Francisco with nobody at the controls and make it onto the bridge, drive the bridge, get off. There was a little hiccup. We scraped the side of the corner when we got off and then make it its way down to Treasure Island and deliver pizza there.
You had a police escort, but you did it. You say that was your aha moment, that this was a possibility.
It was a possibility and it was important. And you knew that if this worked, it was like everybody's gonna want this.
That pizza delivery on board a self-driving car led Google to go all in on autonomous vehicles. The self-driving project became part of Project X, a semi-secret research arm of Google that funds ideas with world-changing potential.
And it was Google's top secret innovation lab, where really kind of game-changing, radical new technologies could be tested. So my very first job was to build a car that could safely drive in San Francisco. And we did so secretly. We didn't tell the public about it. We just had a safety driver inside who could safely take over. And we never caused an accident. And we drove in San Francisco and Los Angeles and around Lake Tahoe and many places in California.
Eventually, Chris Urmson joined the Google self-driving car project. The team already included Lewandowski. It was led by Thrun. Much of the early software code and technology was based on what they learned during the DARPA races.
The field of machine learning, which at the time was very poorly developed, would play a major role. So instead of just programming a car, you do what you do with teenagers. You put them behind the wheel and criticize them and applaud them and let them try and error so that they can learn how to drive.
Within 4 years, Google got a license to operate a self-driving car in Nevada, the first of its kind. The team continued to test the self-driving car through the streets of Silicon Valley.
One of the things that we did was to extensively map the environment. We felt if a car is to drive like a taxi in the same city over and over again, it might as well have elephant memory and remember exactly where all the traffic lights are and so on.
Cars like these became a common sight as Google's self-driving vehicles logged more than 1 million miles of test drives.
And we got to have the first car drive down Lombard Street. While we were imperfect, we got to the point where we're like, yeah, this works. We drove across all the Bay Bridges. We convinced ourselves that this could happen. And we convinced an industry, created an industry.
The following year, Google unveiled Firefly. The vehicle was a prototype of what autonomous vehicles can be. It had no steering wheel and no gas or brake pedal. In 2015, Lewandowski left to launch his own self-driving truck company named Otto. That company was bought by Uber, but the honeymoon didn't last long. Less than a year later, Lewandowski was fired by Uber after Google accused him of downloading thousands of confidential files from the Google self-driving car project before he left. Lewandowski eventually pleaded guilty to stealing trade secrets. He was pardoned by President Donald Trump. Google kept going forward with its self-driving car project. In 2015, a landmark drive. Firefly made the first trip of a fully autonomous vehicle on the streets of Austin, Texas. There was no safety driver on board, no police escort, no closed streets. The car didn't have a steering wheel or pedals. The only person in the car was blind. By now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with Waymo? In 2016, the Google self-driving project was renamed Waymo. Waymo began road testing without a safety driver near Phoenix, Arizona, with Chrysler Pacifica minivans. But building self-driving vehicles proved to be expensive. Google spent more than $1 billion in the first 6 years of the project.
The costs are clear. Talent is very expensive. The compute needed to train the models behind the autonomous technology is very expensive. Running fleets of vehicles is very expensive, and that's not going to change.
Is this a research project or a business? If they are a business, they need very deep pockets to continue to play the game.
It wasn't long before Waymo teamed up with Jaguar to convert I-Pace electric sedans to self-driving vehicles. It's these cars that California allowed to operate on San Francisco city streets without a safety driver in 2018, and to begin operating as a limited version of robotaxis in 2020.
We knew we wanted to build a level 4 vehicle, meaning you don't have any responsibility in the driving task, and that we wanted to make it something that people could use in cities.
The ride to get to where we are now has been bumpy, as the cars learn to navigate traffic and San Francisco residents learn to coexist with robots moving on their own around the city. February 9th, 2023.
I thought a bomb went off. My windows shattered.
An explosion inside a home rocks a quiet residential neighborhood in San Francisco. While emergency crews searched for survivors, police securing the area in one neighborhood street had an unexpected worry.
I'll pop a flare.
A police officer frantically tries to get a Waymo's car's attention.
I'm gonna pop a flare so it doesn't move and run over the water line.
The car inches closer to water lines.
It senses objects, right?
No one is behind the wheel.
I don't think this is a speed bump. We'll go right over it. Yeah, it's gonna mess up the rescue.
A human driver pulls up to the scene.
No, go back!
An officer yells at the driver and the car goes away. But the Waymo driverless car won't budge.
No, you stay.
The officer then calls for help.
Got a bit of a pickle. I got an autonomous vehicle, the Waymo. It's inching slowly and closely to the one of the main water lines that the SF Fire just charged. Can't run it over. Is there a way you could contact like a responsible to come out and disable this vehicle? I don't trust this AI.
So when we have a human driver and they're not pulling over, we can often signal to them to go right, to go left, to get out of our way. With autonomous vehicles, we can yell at them, we can wave at them, and there is nobody in there to do what we are asking them to do. Typically, they will just stop and not move, or they'll stop and keep trying to creep forward.
As the number of driverless cars on San Francisco streets went up, so did complaints from police, from fire officials, and from public transit drivers.
They've gotten in our way on fire scenes when we are actively fighting a fire. They have blocked our engine companies from actually getting out the door of their fire station to go on a call.
San Francisco officials were powerless.
There's a big rub here that you have all these very real headaches developing on the street here with traffic congestion and concerns from first responders, but city officials here don't have any regulatory authority to do anything about it. So they're the ones who are getting the phone calls from angry residents They're the ones who are trying to deal with 911 calls, but it's the state level that is really setting the tone right here. They've permitted this to continue.
There have been endless videos shared on social media of both Cruise and Waymo vehicles blocking roads and first responders or police sort of trying to work out how to move these things. That is a common grievance about the technology.
The city wanted to cut back the number of autonomous vehicles on the street, but it does not regulate the industry. The state does, through the Department of Motor Vehicles and the California Public Utilities Commission. And these agencies were getting ready to let autonomous vehicles move into the fast lane. But road bumps started popping up.
Nobody's driving.
Autonomous vehicles were spotted blocking traffic.
I have no idea who to call about this.
Impeding buses and getting in the way of emergency responders.
The car will kind of get to a scene and it doesn't know what to do, so it stops. But now you have a brick in the middle of an active crime scene.
The reality is, driving is complex. Getting 90% right is easy. Getting 99% right is easy. But getting 99.99999% right, so that we can really exceed the safety, beyond the safety of human driving, is hard because there's so many different situations in the driving world.
95% of accidents are caused by humans, therefore computers are going to be better. Like, they will be better in the long term, but there's a whole set of problems that computers make that humans don't.
In the spring of 2023, when the CPUC indicated it was about to let Cruise and Waymo operate without restrictions in San Francisco, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, city officials asked the CPUC to slam on the brakes. They wanted Cruise and Waymo to share data on the frequency of these incidents. The AV companies resisted.
We intend to identify challenges with the current reporting framework, develop a shared goal.
It all came to a head at a special meeting, ahead of a vote to allow full deployment of AVs in San Francisco.
I can tell you that our fire department is beyond concerned.
It was two opposing camps.
There's just a lack of understanding of AVs.
Officials were asking AV companies to share reports of when the robotaxis stop in traffic or require a manual override to get out of a situation it does not understand. Waymo and Cruise resisted. In 2022, Waymo sued the Department of Motor Vehicles to prevent data on driverless car crashes from being made public. Waymo, to say it kindly, was evasive about what data it was willing to share.
Are there existing metrics that Waymo's collecting that could be indicative of some of the concerns that we have raised?
That's something that we are still thinking about. There's not anything that we felt like immediately jumped out as a great solution.
Are you keeping a data set of these minimum risk conditions, these MRCs?
We don't currently have something that matches exactly what has been proposed here.
MRCs are minimal risk conditions, like stalling in traffic. Waymo instead pushed to only share information on collisions or infractions.
It's always clearer and more efficient to implement a data requirement that's defined by objective factual criteria, such as like the issuance of a citation, or criteria that's quantitatively measurable, as opposed to more subjective criteria like involvement.
Involvement, meaning a human had to override the driverless software to fix an issue.
Hazardous unplanned stops are not all minimal risk condition events. How many of them are there? What is their duration? What is their impact? We had an incident that involved a transit vehicle. The AV company felt that it was quite successful in getting there to remove the vehicle in 7 minutes. That was not a success from our perspective. People had to get off the vehicle. They had to stand around. They had to figure out whether they should walk home, get another way home.
Let's go over how to approach a driverless Cruise AV during a routine traffic stop.
Cruise and Waymo created videos to show emergency personnel how to deal with autonomous vehicles.
This is San Francisco Fire Department. I need to put the car in manual mode.
Waymo has a 4-member law enforcement outreach team.
Okay, I have access to the steering wheel now.
The autonomous vehicle companies have come and trained some of our members on some of the features of the vehicle.
Try to switch gears.
But it should not be the fire department's job to get into a vehicle and move it when we are in the middle of a fire scene, the middle of a medical scene.
In the end, the California Public Utilities Commission voted to allow Cruise and Waymo to fully deploy robotaxis and begin collecting fares.
Commissioner John? Yes. Commissioner Houck? Yes. Commissioner Schrum?
No.
President Alice Reynolds?
Yes, the vote is 3-1. The item passes. The conversation on how best to integrate AVs into our communities is far from over.
August was a big moment because for that period of time, San Francisco could claim to be the only city in the world where there were two different robotaxi companies offering two separate services 24/7 to the public, and they were able to charge a fare. So it was a real commercial thing.
But then, a horrific incident.
Crews had to use the jaws of life to free a pedestrian trapped underneath the Cruise vehicle on Monday night.
A woman is dragged 20 feet by a Cruise vehicle that failed to detect her. A few weeks after the tragedy, Cruise stopped its driverless taxi service in San Francisco.
When you're 99% of the way there, it can be tempting to think you're ready, but it's a lot harder to get those last 1% of the use cases, and that's really where the technology is today. And 99% is not good enough.
Waymo was taking a more deliberate approach, but still had missteps. In February of 2024, a Waymo vehicle hit a bicyclist. Other incidents have caused concern. A San Francisco couple said they felt trapped inside a Waymo when a passerby approached the vehicle and tried to cover up the sensors as the light turned green.
We felt trapped in the sense that we didn't know what to do in that instance. We didn't really have an understanding. Do we get out? Was it safe to get out of the car?
Waymo says it's hard for anyone to enter the vehicle without authorization. The door handles are hidden and only pop out when activated on the app. And then there was this. A Waymo traveling without a passenger in San Francisco's Chinatown was surrounded by a crowd. The mob spray painted the vehicle, broke windows, and then set it on fire. These incidents highlight something that some passengers have experienced. Feeling trapped when the Waymo vehicle gets into a troublesome situation. And I felt like trapped inside here. I just felt like so useless. I felt that way when the Waymo I rode the first time did not stop where I wanted and then drove around without me knowing where it was going. So hopefully it'll make a left, but it's not. It's gonna make a right. Ooh, I don't know where it's taking me right now. I wish I could talk to the driver.
It's not a good place to be when workers in the street are saying, get out of here. No passenger wants to be in that vehicle.
Despite these problems, Waymo maintains its vehicles are safe, safer than human drivers.
Their concerns are valid. This is a new technology. We do not have a human driving the car. The technology and the data does show that it is safe, but that's not the only thing. To really have that trust, we need to demonstrate that we have a service that's willing to listen to the riders.
For any questions, press the call support button to speak with a rider support agent.
So you just hit the button if you need to have rider support. We have the ability to come and retrieve a vehicle if something like a flat tire happens. We have redundancy in our sensors.
In early 2024, Waymo released a study analyzing more than 7 million miles driven by its autonomous vehicles. It found its driverless cars were nearly 7 times less likely than a human driver to be involved in a crash resulting in injury. The report compared itself to all drivers, not just taxi drivers or ride-hailing drivers from Uber and Lyft. It's important to note that driverless cars that commit an infraction cannot be ticketed. California law requires an officer to hand a moving infraction ticket to a human. But autonomous vehicles don't have a driver. It's a loophole that the state has not yet solved.
Our prior generation was more of classic robotics software approach. This is more of a machine learning first approach with robotics guardrails that guarantee the safety of the system.
As the new year started in 2024, Waymo announced it would expand its services to cities in the San Francisco peninsula.
We took this vehicle and we've had it drive in Los Angeles, which is similar but different. And the vehicle performed well basically out of the box. For us, that was a strong first indicator that the system we're building is starting to generalize and that we're on that path to basically being able to have this thing work in any city that we want it to.
Hello from Waymo.
In March of 2024, Waymo expanded its robotaxi service to the Los Angeles area, deploying in Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and West Hollywood.
When we enter a new city, one of the first things we do is map it and think of that as Google Maps on steroids. And it does have more detail around lane lines. We're not reliant on it fully because, of course, the world can change. You can have construction, you can have all these other things. And so the system is designed to detect when the map has changed and adapt itself, adapt the behavior.
I can see a driver, I can see a pedestrian, and based on perceptions in life, I can assume that that person will probably react a certain way. When will these vehicles be able to do that, this technology?
I argue in part they can do it today. So what we're doing is we're using the data that we've collected and aggregated and then used to train our machine learning models to better understand the environment. When somebody's about to come into your lane, we have that in our data sets. And so we're then predicting where those people will drift and successfully be able to account for that possibility.
Waymo showed off how machine learning is making the robotaxi safer. This video shows a Waymo vehicle pulling up to a Los Angeles intersection. A police officer is using hand signals to communicate with drivers. The Waymo car stops, and when the officer tells it to go, it moves forward through the intersection.
So what was the key element that has put us here today?
So we have a bunch of cameras, as well as laser systems that determine distance to other objects in the scene, and radar systems. And we're using all of that information to look 360 degrees all the way around the car, as far ahead on the front bumper, looking around the corner as best we can, to understand who is a pedestrian, what's a cyclist, what are the other cars in the scene. The machine learning systems are adapting to the environment and understanding more and more using the data that we're collecting.
Melanie was also a participant in the first DARPA races for Team Axion.
I have been honored to be on this journey that's the turning point for autonomous vehicles. It is incredible to see how this has evolved.
The technology we built back in the DARPA Grand Challenges is the early form of what we have today. And when I give talks, I sometimes show a picture of Sandstorm. And it really has all of the parts that are in a modern self-driving truck or car. It's got camera, it's got LiDAR, it's got radar, it's got lots of computing, it's got an off-board map, it used some basic machine learning. And we've basically taken that architecture and evolved it and improved it.
They're really modeled after the human brain. When you dissect the human brain, you find things like neurons, cells, you find electrical signals, this stuff that just interacts in a magical way that makes us be smart. As you learn, you're constantly seeing other situations and you generalize from those. Just imagine the task of learning how to walk. You can't face every single situation in your training phase, but what you're really good at is walking a little bit and then generalize to new situations. One of the beautiful things having a fleet of self-driving cars is when one car learns something interesting, all the other cars know immediately. What a computer can do, it can actually have 100 cars at the same time and bring all those learnings together much better than people can do it. We can't quite link our brains the same way. but it certainly has more experience than any human driver would have during a lifetime of driving.
My first rider-only experience with the Waymo driver, it was amazing how quickly you became acclimated because you're comfortable.
"12 minutes out. They're coming though."
Never driven in a driverless car before. I'm kind of excited.
I think it's gonna be fun. I'm pumped. All right. Welcome to San Francisco. Hello. Wow, see if it senses this person up here. Get out of the middle of the road. All right, slows down. So far, so good.
Initially, you're like, wow, there's nobody there. And it's very exciting, but then 20 minutes, 15 into the ride, it's like, all right, I'm on my phone because this is becoming normal.
The good thing about these cars is you can make out in the back and it doesn't even matter no one's watching, right? There's no driver. You feel awkward about it.
The Waymo driver is such a smooth operator. The Waymo driver doesn't get distracted. It doesn't get drunk. It's always operating within the law. That this is a safer way to go.
I'm excited for that technology. I think it's great. I think it's going to make things easier. 10 years from now, I think the roads will be a safer place once they get all the kinks figured out.
I think it would get annoying if you were going far because it's so conscientious. It's not going to do anything overly efficient. It's just going to cruise carefully.
It might be jerky. It might be, those are perceptions and feelings you have. It's kind of like, think of it as like you're flying on an airplane and it's like bumpy because you're over Denver. It feels scary. And you're like, oh my God, the plane's gonna fall out of the sky. And then the captain comes on and he like reassures you. There's no equivalent of that for the self-driving piece where there's no understanding and we're still in the infancy of it.
And there continues to be hiccups, some of them alarming. This Waymo in San Francisco got stuck behind a group of people out on a night ride on electric unicycles. The Waymo goes on the lane of oncoming traffic and drives there for 2 blocks, even as oncoming cars had to swerve out of the way.
Waymo, that's the wrong lane!
Later, Waymo said its vehicle made the safest choice, even though it could have just followed behind the group or pulled over to let them go by. In May, a Waymo crashed into a power pole. Waymo recalled 672 vehicles to reprogram them, the second vehicle recall in months. It came as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration was investigating Waymo for unreported crashes. The investigation ultimately cleared Waymo of any wrongdoing. But Waymo continues on the fast lane to a driverless future. It's already testing its next generation vehicle, Zeekr. It has no steering wheel and no pedal.
It is going to be purpose-built for autonomous vehicle ride-hailing. It's going to have this great, comfortable interior.
They kind of look like toasters, these cars that have 4 to 6 seats, and because these cars are purpose-built, they're going to be much cheaper for companies to operate.
But do robotaxis have a future? Among the 3 pioneers, Sebastian Thrun, Anthony Lewandowski, and Chris Urmson, none are still working on driverless taxis. They all differ in what the future of self-driving vehicles will look like.
Right now, an Uber is about $1.50 a mile. A car ownership ends up to be roughly 50 cents a mile. When a Waymo costs 30 cents a mile, people will have an incentive not to own cars anymore, but instead share cars.
The trucking market in the US is about $700 billion with a B, so it's gigantic. Ride-hailing in the US is tens of billions of dollars business, and the first place we see building a business is in trucking.
You may want to drive on Carmel and enjoy yourself, and sometimes you may just want to send the car to go pick up the kids. Think of it as like another family member, right? As opposed to thinking of it as a replacement for the ride-sharing driver in question.
Whatever the future is, it won't be the technology that holds self-driving vehicles back. It will be the money.
Funding could be one of the things that either holds back or, if you get really pessimistic, dooms this industry. We've seen the likes of Uber and Lyft lose billions of dollars. In a robotaxi context, the companies that operate them will need to own the vehicle, do the maintenance on the vehicle, make sure the vehicles are meeting regulation. That's a whole different cost equation right now. It's not a ride-hailing business model, it's more of a taxi fleet business model.
By 2025, Waymo unmanned vehicles have driven over 100 million fully autonomous miles. It says its technology is improving road safety, with its data reflecting 78% fewer injury-causing collisions in the cities they operate in. They've expanded, driving 250,000 driverless trips across 5 American cities, including Phoenix, the San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Austin, and Atlanta. In 2026, the company plans to expand to Miami, Washington, D.C., and Dallas.